Here is Jeremy Corbyn writing a foreword for a book that is pretty much, if you were to instruct a computer algorithm to assemble all of the ancient tropes of anti-Semitism between two hardback covers, they would pretty much come up with J.A. Hobson's Imperialism, or parts of it. And back in 2000 and, get the year right, 11, so only 8 years ago, a bunch of publishers in London sat around and determined to republish this book. A book that essentially accused the Jews of running everything, owning everything, fomenting war and hatred to further their own financial gains. And as they sat in that room and ran through presumably a list of people who might be amenable to the idea of endorsing or supporting this book, the name that popped out of the bottom of their deliberations was Jeremy Corbyn MP, back then a little-known backbencher with a reputation for voting against his own whip on a dizzyingly regular basis. No problem with that. He describes the book as brilliant. He describes it as a fantastic tome. And in this book we read that finance in Europe was controlled by men of a single and peculiar race. And we read this book, which was published in 1902, with a little reminder in the back of our head that the modern state of Israel did not exist in 1902. So here is Jeremy Corbyn, unable, or his followers, utterly unable to conflate criticism of the modern state of Israel with bile directed at Jews. Because the modern state of Israel did not exist in 1902. So, endorsing a book which talks of finance in Europe being controlled by men of a single and peculiar race is not criticism of Benjamin Netanyahu. It's not criticism of Israeli foreign policy. It's not criticism of the treatment of the Palestinian people. It's not criticism of the Likud party. It is racial hatred of a single and peculiar race. And it was endorsed by the leader of the Labour Party. Which means that today is the day that you choose between the evidence of your own eyes and ears or between blind, cultish devotion. And if you're choosing blind, cultish devotion, I'd really like to talk to you today. And I'd really like to hear your attempts to persuade me that it's not blind, cultish devotion in which you indulge. It's something altogether more nuanced and transparent. And the phone lines are open. 034560 60973. The rejection of the Labour Party membership's desire for a second referendum is moot today. The fact that the man has turned out to be neither democratic nor concerned particularly with the thoughts of the membership is moot for the purposes of our conversation today. I'm also, as I mentioned in my introduction, a little uncomfortable with the full rules and regulations, the complicated roster of rules regarding election periods. So we'll focus on this. Rothschilds. Does anyone seriously suppose that a great war could be undertaken by any European state or a great state loan subscribed if the House of Rothschild and its connections set their face against it? This is the book that Jeremy Corbyn has described as brilliant. He writes himself in the foreword that the book is correct and prescient, railing against the commercial interests that fuel the role of the popular press with tales of imperial might. And he is the leader in this country of the party that is supposed to represent the interests of the oppressed and the discriminated against and the minority. And here he is. A Labour Party spokesman, because the chances of Jeremy Corbyn appearing in public to defend him this himself are zero. Because that's the great Democrat. That's the great transparent and accountable, refreshing change to a kinder and gentler politics, who will not appear in public to defend this and whose fans will now use it as an excuse to justify his failure to be held to account or scrutinised in public, because Seamus Milne, his Director of Communications, remains in the background telling him what he can and can't say. Not just telling Jeremy Corbyn what he can and can't say, but as television footage demonstrated yesterday, telling Keir Starmer, the Shadow Secretary of State for Brexit, what he can and can't say. Seamus Milne, I would remind you, has been elected by precisely nobody. He has, however, been filmed on stage with Vladimir Putin. And he has spoken and written extensively in the past about his admiration for Joseph Stalin. This is what the Labour Party said last night. Jeremy praised the liberal Hobson's century-old classic study of imperialism in Africa and Asia. Similar to other books of its era, Hobson's work contains outdated and offensive references and observations, and Jeremy completely rejects the anti-Semitic elements of his analysis, which of course poses one simple and powerful question. Why didn't Jeremy mention this in the introduction that he wrote? Why didn't Jeremy mention that he completely rejects the anti-Semitic elements of an analysis that he described in black and white as brilliant? And why are you letting him get away with this? You, who are committed to a party that stands up for the rights of the discriminated against and the oppressed. Why are you sticking up for a man who has described as brilliant a book which runs through the vilest and oldest of anti-Semitic tropes as if they were going out of fashion? Why? 0345 6060 973. And how are you going to do it today? How are you going to justify it today? Let you down on Brexit, let you down on a second referendum, and now it emerges 8 years ago he was writing fan letters to vile, centuries-old anti-Semitism.